Welcome to Law Society Younger Members Committee Career Information Session number 4. Avril Flannery talks to Fiona McKeever about finding your inner confidence.
I'd like to welcome you all here today, and thanks everybody for joining today's information session. My name is Avril Flannery. I'm the Vice Chair of the Younger Members Committee. And today, for Mental Health Awareness Week, we're holding our session on strengthening or finding your self-confidence. We're finding more and more with these information sessions that the way we work is so intricately linked with our mental health. So having these sessions are very fruitful and beneficial for not only younger members, but for everybody at all stages of the profession. Now, I'd just like to highlight that in the chat function, you're able to pass any questions to myself and Fiona privately. So if you just send it to panelists, and if you have any questions, you can raise them directly there, and I'll be able to raise them throughout the conversation with Fiona. So Fiona is an expert. So we're joined today by Fiona McKeever. Hello, Fiona.
Hi, Avril. Hi, everybody.
Fiona is an executive and leadership coach, and prior to moving to coaching, Fiona was a partner for 12 years with Arthur Cox, and she was responsible for the professional development of lawyers at all stages of their careers. Today, so broadly, I'm going to describe what we're going to be discussing today. So today we're going to be discussing, I suppose, imposter syndrome. I'll go over that again in a moment. Mistakes and vis-a-vis dealing with criticism, and putting you forward for an advancement or indeed that pay rise. Although we represent members of 0 to 7 years PQE, Fiona, I'm sure you'll agree that what we do, confidence is something that affects people at all stages of their career. And when we talk about imposter syndrome, what we mean is where we have these times of individual doubts, where we sit back, we're doubting our skills, we're doubting our abilities, we're wondering how the hell we got that degree sometimes, you know. And what I want to know is, do you have any practical advice to build up our confidence for those moments when you're at your most vulnerable? So I'll leave it with you, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Avril, and really delighted to be here and see so many online this evening. And it is a topic that really comes up so frequently in my coaching sessions, and it's really a topic that resonates with so many of you. So hopefully I'll be able to offer some practical tips that you can use. So the first point that I want to make is that it's perfectly normal to have self-doubt and to have dips in confidence, and those temporary confidence issues often coincide with times of professional transition. So for those of you who are already qualified, if you remember back to that time when you qualified, that transition from being a trainee to a qualified solicitor is often accompanied by a dip in confidence. So if you think about it, you have new responsibilities, you feel that there are new expectations on you, and often actually the title of solicitor can be quite burdensome for some people, and it's something that people can actually lose confidence over. So periods of transition, it's perfectly normal to lose your confidence, and similarly with promotions, when people move from senior associate to senior associate, or from senior associate indeed to partner. So of course with the pandemic, that also affects confidence because we obviously it creates a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty around our career paths, our financial plans. So when we feel that we haven't got control over what's going on, that really does affect our confidence. When I'm coaching people, my real concern is where those feelings of doubt become permanent and pervasive. So it's normal to have dips in confidence, but when it becomes permanent or pervasive, or if your beliefs become very rigid and fixed, it's very, very difficult then to overcome those confidence issues. So this evening, I want to share some practical tips on how to manage those points. And a word of caution: they are practical, but they're not quick fixes. They're not life hacks. So it does take a little bit of time, and you do need to invest some time in creating new habits actually, and dismantling some of those unhelpful thoughts and beliefs that you might have. So I was a solicitor for 20 years, so I do want to start with a definition like a good lawyer. Confidence is defined as the belief that one can have faith in or rely on someone or something. It's a feeling of self-assurance arising from an appreciation of one's own abilities. So absolutely critical to the feeling of confidence, of behaving confidently, and also being experienced as a confident person, is this idea of beliefs. So beliefs are at the heart of confidence. What you tell yourself about yourself and others, whether that's positive, negative, whether that's limiting, whether that's powerful, and that in itself affects your confidence. So managing your beliefs is critical. So I have four things I want to share with you. The first, again, like a good lawyer, I want to turn to evidence. So the first thing is evidence. So if I'm working with people, when I'm coaching people, it's really important that I get them to build up that bank of evidence, that bank of positive feedback that they might have received from clients or colleagues in the past. Because if we can remember that we've done something successfully in the past, and maybe not perfectly, but we've had successful outcomes in the past, it is much easier to access that feeling of self-belief and self-assuredness in those moments when you have this dip in confidence. So we have a tendency to delete and distort our experience, and we often trick ourselves into thinking, well, I wasn't very successful, that was a fluke, or I was just really lucky that I got that promotion, or it just happened that client was really nice. That's known as deletion. That's known as distortion of evidence. And if we're not able to access that positive information, that positive belief, it becomes more difficult to actually access that information when we actually need it. So it is really important for us all and everybody in the call to regularly take stock of those professional achievements, to take stock of the skills that you've developed and the experience that you've developed, so that if you do that regularly, it becomes a habit that can neutralize those feelings of self-doubt in those moments when they happen, because they will happen.
So beyond hanging your degrees up in the wall, Fiona, like hanging up a cork board on the wall with your thank you cards or the cases that you've appeared in or anything like that, like have a little bit of a vision board that you can look to from time to time, could be beneficial for people to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's really important to make tangible some of this positive feedback that you have received. And I have no doubt that every single person on this call has received a thank you or a well done, or you really got us out of a pickle. That is evidence that you are able, that you're competent, that you're able to do your job, and you need to be able to access those beliefs in moments of self-doubt. So I would, in addition to what you've suggested, Avril, I really would encourage people just to keep a file of those emails that you get from clients. I mean, you can delete the name of the client, but just have that information to hand. And I want everybody who's on the call now to think about 3 professional achievements that they've had where they are proud of the contribution that they've made to that successful outcome. I just want to pause for a couple of seconds and let that land. If I were to ask each and every one of you, what are your tell me 3 professional achievements that you're proud of? And when I ask those questions in coaching sessions, I often get an embarrassed shrug, or well, that's very self-indulgent to focus on that. But again, this is creating this bank of evidence that is really, really important for us. So that's the first practical approach that I want to offer. So the second thing, Avril, is around managing your inner voice.
Okay.
So have you ever noticed that running commentary that goes on in your head, or is it just me?
That's the imposter syndrome. I think especially the first 3 years PQE, 'cause I'm beyond that now, but that was be very relevant at the early stage of your career that I can identify with. But I'm sure everybody can identify that with that, Fiona.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is this running commentary in our heads, which often is there to actually protect us from danger. Watch out. Be careful. But sometimes that voice can be very loud, and it can be very negative, and it can be very unhelpful. So you might think, oh, I have to give a client presentation. I can't do this. I've never done it before, or I've been asked to pitch with a colleague. This is really difficult. I find public speaking very challenging. The more of those negative thoughts that you have, and the more of that negative talk that you tell yourself, the more likely you are to believe it. So it's really important to actually manage those thoughts. So I'm not here to pretend that those thoughts don't exist. So it's not about sort of suppressing it. It's actually about sort of acknowledging that you have a negative thought, or perhaps an unhelpful thought. What I want to encourage people to do is actually think about additional positive thoughts that they could have, so to generate alternative perspectives. So if I give an example, you've been asked to go to a client meeting with a new client, and the things that might be going through your head, particularly as a junior, might be, oh, this is a really important client. I've got a lot. There's a lot of responsibility on me. What happens if the client asks me a question and I don't have the answer? What if this client is really, really difficult? So those are all the thoughts that you might have. Alternative ways of thinking about that might be, this is a new client, but I've actually met several clients like this category of client before, and I've been able to get through it. I've actually done a lot of preparation for this meeting or this call, so I may not be able to answer every single question, but I'm confident that I can answer many of the questions, and I have a strategy for dealing with the questions that I can't answer. And also to look at things from another perspective. If a partner has faith in you and sends you off to a meeting, it is important to have that belief that that partner does have faith in you and believes in you. So instead of simply having that voice of, oh my goodness, what if the client asks me difficult questions, you've got alternative thoughts. And it's really important to think flexibly in terms of sort of maintaining and enhancing your confidence. If you get trapped or imprisoned in that sort of cycle of, I can't do this, or it's really, I'm really concerned about the consequences, then you are more likely to focus on all the things that go wrong, and it can be really paralyzing.
Yeah.
And you end up spending a lot of energy thinking about all the things that might go wrong, instead of doing a risk assessment. These are all the things I need to prepare for, and this is how I'm going to manage it.
Yeah.
So generating additional alternative thoughts is really, really, really positive. If you hear yourself saying, I can't, or it's always, or it's never going to change, those are clues that you're thinking rigidly, and you may be stuck, or you may be a prisoner in your own thoughts, which are unhelpful.
So just I suppose when you're thinking like that, when you're saying you need to be more flexible thinking, is it that you should reflect back on times where you did well, or that people believed in you, or go back to your vision board or your thank you board, or is that how you cope with them? Mechanism?
Yeah, so you can return back to that bank of evidence, that vision board, the cork board with all the thank yous, or in the moment you could also just pause and go through that process of noticing the thought, acknowledging that it may be there to help you, because as a professional you want to do a good job. You want to be deliver a quality service. You want to be seen as as a nice person. So being anxious and being having some of those negative thoughts can serve a purpose. So acknowledge that, but in the moment you can actually generate alternative ideas and alternative ways of looking at the context and the situation. So there's things that the positive stock taking, the vision board, the more you do that, this will become a habit. But even in the moment, you can actually manage those thoughts.
Okay. I have a question from, I'm not going to name the person, but the question is, what advice would you give junior solicitors who are looking at changing jobs or wish to keep their jobs in an increasingly competitive market, and that they're doubting their own confidence, I suppose, to make those changes?
Okay. I would encourage that person to do that positive stock taking exercise.
Yeah.
So start with the evidence. Look at, really capture that experience that you have. I've no doubt that everybody on this call and the person who's asked that question has had experiences which demonstrate their knowledge, their client relationship skills, perhaps some strategic ability. I mean, when you are a junior solicitor, you are not expected to know everything. You are not a master at this stage, and actually, we always expect people to make mistakes, even though it's not intentional. So these things happen, and we can talk a little bit more about mistakes.
We'll come into that. I
Subsequently.
suppose it's dealing with your inner voice, nearly, isn't it? I know you're going to come to that now, Fiona.
So positive stock taking, capture that evidence, and then listen to that voice. At least acknowledge that running commentary, that inner voice, and then challenge it. And just challenge it and ask yourself, is this actually true? Are these beliefs actually true? So it's really important not to get stuck in that feeling of, I can't do this, so I'm going to change profession. That's a sign of very sort of rigid thinking, which which isn't helpful in generating alternatives. Just a couple of very quick points around behaving as if. So I personally don't like the phrase "fake it until you make it." It smacks of insincerity. It smacks of fakery. It doesn't ring true with me. But there is an element of truth of behaving and acting as a confident person. So again, in the moment, I would encourage people to be thinking about, well, how does a confident person behave? Think about their eye contact. Think about their posture. Do they sit up straight? Do they stand straight? Do they come across prepared? Do they come across sort of calm and deliberate? And I know those may be difficult behaviors to learn or to even practice, but I would encourage people to actually just notice that even the sort of sitting and standing up straight, and breathing is actually quite important. I'm sure some people are very are very accomplished mindfulness practitioners, or do yoga, but even for people who aren't really that involved in mindfulness or yoga, even a simple breathing technique which will actually slow your system down, which will calm you down, which will allow you to think more flexibly. And the breathing technique is simply breathe in for 4 counts, hold your breath for 7 counts, and then breathe out for 8 counts. And you do that 3 or 4 times, only takes a minute or two, and it will have an impact on your physiology. It will have an impact on your system. So that's just, it's just a simple thing that you might be able to try in the moment. But
is there any videos or any books or literature or anything on that people could look up that they could?
Yes. So, I mean, there are lots of things. I don't know if anybody can see this, but this is one particular book that I like. It's called The Mindfulness Book, and it's by Martin Newman. And this, deals with stress management through sort of breathing and mindfulness. So it's quite a nice read. So that's one thing. The Harvard Business Review has a nice article on imposter syndrome. So it's about the dangers of feeling a fake. So it goes into this in a bit more detail. It's probably 15 years old at this stage, but it is it's a good read.
Relevant.
Short read as well. Yeah.
I suppose you can find everything on YouTube. So you could just Google YouTube breathing techniques and put it on and sit back if you're having a moment, and that would help get you back in the zone, for want of a better word.
Exactly.
A Superman pose might help as well, Fiona, would it?
Well, there's a lot of there's a lot of research around power poses. So there's a lot of research done by a lady called Amy Cuddy, And it's where if you adopt the Superman pose, or, you know, you make yourself quite big, you know, you stand up, usually somewhere private. You know, there's research to show that actually has an impact on your on the system, which sort of you know, basically calms you down. There's also some conflicting evidence around it. I quite like the power pose, actually. So Amy Cuddy is another reference to look at, and she's got a TED talk. You'll get some references there as well.
Brilliant. So I suppose that leads us on to our next section. I suppose we kind of alluded to it earlier on, but it's about mistakes and, you know, also dealing with criticism. I suppose from one thing is not necessarily that you make a mistake, but like you described earlier on, Fiona, like you go to that meeting and let's say you had something that went wrong in the past and you're almost living in that. And that, let's say, it could be perceived as a mistake. As a junior lawyer, as a senior lawyer, you might make it bigger, you know. Yeah. And then what happens then is it snowballs and it seems to get bigger and bigger, and then you're almost feeling like you can't face that, like the presentation or like meeting that difficult client or make, you know, whatever it might be. What are your views? Is there anything that could help people deal with those kind of issues?
So again, you know, it's very normal actually for people to make mistakes, and even experience and seniority is not, you know, you're not immune from making mistakes. Of course, nobody intentionally wants to make a mistake, but it is important just, you know, often to put things in context and perspective, and to think about the, you know, like the size of the mistake as well. You know, not all mistakes are equal. You know, a typo in a letter to a client is a mistake. It's unfortunate, but it's not, you know, it's not career limiting. But there, you know, there are other things that may be slightly more serious. And of course, you know, if something serious does happen, of course, you know, go and speak to somebody in your firm, a colleague, and make sure that it's addressed. But in terms of sort of, again, managing your emotions, it really comes back to managing your thoughts. You know, I've worked a lot with people who have become paralyzed with almost the fear of doing something wrong, or you know, they extract a very extreme conclusion from having a mistake. So, you know, there's a typo in a letter, I'm a rubbish solicitor. You know, they jump to these enormous conclusions. And really what the brain then hears is, I'm a rubbish solicitor, I'm a rubbish solicitor. So what I would encourage people to do, again, is it's coming back to managing the thoughts. Notice the thought, you know, what's going on. Ask yourself, is this a helpful way of thinking about this previous mistake, or this, you know, this thing that's going to happen? Are there other ways of thinking about it? And you know, if you have made a mistake, you know, it's worth asking yourself, well, in what circumstances did this mistake happen? So you can try and perhaps eliminate or manage those circumstances in the future. And, you know, so I would always encourage people to sort of analyze sort of mistakes, you know, after they happen. So you actually get to the point of, you know, so what would I do differently? So if this whole situation and scenario were to arise again, what would I do differently?
Yeah.
And if you go through that process of noticing it, asking yourself, is this helpful to think this way? What other ways could I think about it? What were the circumstances? Who is involved? What was the time? What would I do differently? It allows you then to move on. It allows you to sort of tell yourself, I've actually analysed that. I don't need to invest any more time or energy thinking about that. And you can actually move on and let it go.
And I always find as well, you know, when you talk to a senior colleague, you know, someone who's been through it before, they always give you that little bit of advice. And it's always like, there's no such thing as a trained eye, it's trained, you know, and usually somebody that has gone that bit ahead of you has got really helpful tips, and you don't have to go through the torture of overthinking how you're going to get about things, you know. I've always found that. So I suppose this brings us to the last section, Fiona. So we have a question, so I'm not going to say from who, but someone who's starting a new, more specialist role next week. Do you have any advice on managing a new employer's expectations of your ability without becoming overwhelmed and allowing imposter syndrome to creep in? Thank you.
So in that scenario, I would suggest, you know, speaking to your employer, once you start, and being, understanding what their expectations are. So, you've gone through the interview process, they've met you, I'm sure they understand, your experience to date, perhaps some of the limitations, and I mean that in a sort of in a normal way. But when you start a new job, you're dealing with a new culture, you're dealing with new people, and if you don't communicate with the people you're working with, there is a risk that a vacuum will form, and you will fill that vacuum. You'll fill your mind full of all the negative thoughts, i.e., I'm not experienced enough. I don't have the right background, credibility, and then you extract the solution, the conclusion, I'm not very good at this, and I'll move on very quickly. So it's really, really important to communicate with your new employers and find out what their expectations are. Find out, what resources are available. So what, technical resources are available. Are there precedents? Are there practice notes? Ask for a mentor, ask for a buddy system. If particularly if you're going into a bigger organization, there are lots and lots of people who are experienced in this area. So ask them to support you, and so take control of that side of things. And then if you notice these negative thoughts spiraling out of control, it's about just acknowledging, well, it is going to take you time to get up to a particular speed, and here's my plan to get up to speed. Here, these are the areas of law I'm going to invest some time reading about it, looking at the precedents, etc. So I mean, it's not going to be straightforward, but that doesn't mean to say it can't be done. It's a matter of having a plan.
I always think, sometimes, I switched to a more specialist one time myself. I somebody said to me the probation period of 6 months is there for a reason. You've got a good chance to get a good, run at things. Yeah. And then after that, but no one expects you to know everything at 6 months either. Just if you just have the basics, you're doing, you'd be fine. But that's what advice I had before anyway. So we're going to go into the last section now, and I see another comment from someone else, so I'm going to come out, add them at the end. So with regard to pay rise or advancing your career, I suppose everybody from a trainee, they're not really looking for a pay rise, they're trying to get a job, but they're trying to still negotiate their pay as well. A newly qualified solicitor, or right up until you get to partner, everybody's going to be negotiating or trying to advance their career. So is there any common thread of advice, Fiona, that could apply to everyone that you can think of?
So I think there are a couple of things to mention, and it applies across the board, whether it's salary discussions, whether it's negotiations, or career advancement. First of all, get your data. So if it's around salary, what is the market rate? And I know recruitment agents do surveys that they make available from time to time about what the rate is in different areas of the country. So arm yourself with data. In terms of career advancement, understand what the expectations are of your organization. So each firm is different. Each law firm may have slightly different expectations. Okay. Did I break up there?
A little bit.
Okay. So understand what the firm's expectations are for the next level. And you need to understand that 6 months, a year before you then go in and say I want a promotion, because you need time to demonstrate and evidence that you've met that criteria. So get the criteria. The next point that's really important is, if you want to influence somebody, whether it's a partner, a line manager, anybody, you need to put yourself in that person's shoes, the other person's shoes. So if you want to go to a partner and say, I'd like a promotion, or I've met all the criteria that you've set me, you need to be presenting that information in a way that they will receive. And that's a matter of understanding, well, what is really important to that particular partner? Is it keeping their team? Is it bringing in new clients? Is it having a profitable business? So you really need to pitch your position in a way that's going to actually land with that, it's going to be obvious that that meets that other person's needs. And similarly, some partners are quite happy to shoot the breeze and just have an informal chat. Some partners will want a briefing paper, 2 days advance notice of a meeting. So you have to understand, how does that other person want to receive their information, and present that information in that way. So even though you would like to just go in and sort of stamp your feet and say, give me a promotion, that may not be the way the partner or the other person is going to is going to receive that information well. So there's just a couple of things to bear in mind.
Yeah, and I suppose just looking for the pay rise or looking for the advancement. I mean, there's no point sitting around waiting for it to happen. You have to knock on the door and ask. Otherwise people, I suppose, would feel resentful. But if you're passive, nobody's going to know you're looking, and that's it. You have to be active in what you're looking for. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm picking up on that point. It's about actively managing your career. If you're passive about your career, then things will happen to you. People will do your career to you. But if you can proactively manage your career, and I don't mean in 20 years time this is what I want to be, it's actually just thinking in the next 12 months, what type of clients do I want to be working with, what type of work do I want to do, do I understand the criteria, and communicating with the people that you work with. So I would encourage as regular a conversation as possible with the people you work with, so that it just becomes part of the, it's just a conversation rather than it being a really big deal. But you have to be an active participant in that.
Yeah, and just looking for maybe reviews. It might necessarily have to be salary reviews, but maybe just to check in that you're doing okay. It's nice to get reviews.
Yeah, they don't need to be formal necessarily. I'm not talking about employment law type of reviews, simply just checking in and making sure that you are meeting and hopefully exceeding their expectations for the next level.
That's great. Thanks so much, Fiona. So there's currently CPD sessions available free to members on breathing is one of the topics covered. So I'd advise everybody to look at that, and you get CPD for it, so it's great. If anybody's been impacted by anything today, there's loads of resources in the Law Society. There's Legal Mind, which is mental health support. 2 wonderful Consult Colleague helpline, which is free and confidential. You could just ring and talk to a colleague anonymously about anything personal or professional, which is great if you have a mistake or anything that you want to talk about. Same with Law Care, it's free and confidential, but it's also open to trainees and staff and families of solicitors. So that's saying something that we need that line. Tomorrow at 1 p.m. there's another session, impact of COVID-19 on your anxiety and mood. Bridge O'Mara of Aware, and Director of Services, is going to be there. So I suppose with another lockdown, level 3 all over the country, this might be relevant to some people. So do tune in tomorrow at 1 o'clock, join us. And I think that's it. I think we've gone a little bit over, Fiona, but I think I've everyone's questions covered. I'll just double check if there's anything else. And there's a wellbeing hub as well. So if you want to look at the resources, I've just called them out, some of them out there, but there's a plethora of them.
Yeah, and of course, if anybody wants to link in with me on LinkedIn, just send me a message and we'll connect, because it is important to connect to people. If you are isolating yourself or feeling isolated, it doesn't help with confidence. So connecting with people on LinkedIn, attending this webinar, talking to people about the webinar, what you've learned.
Yeah, sorry, Fiona, you're just cutting off.
Ideas it's generated, stay connected to your colleagues and your peers.
Okay, so listen, thanks everybody. So we're going to end here today. Fiona, you got slightly cut off, but everybody, please connect with Fiona. If you want to connect with our Younger Members Committee anytime with any questions, you're welcome to do so as well. Thanks very much, and we'll see you all next week or tomorrow. And thank you very much, Fiona. Goodbye.